Hello. In this article I share C# code for a real-time data worksheet function callable using RTD. It will call into a local instance of Redis and will tick in real time. This article assumes you have already installed Redis. So I am very much pleased with Redis, and as outlined in the two articles here and here I wrote earlier this month. I hope you've read those previous two articles and or watched the videos. Redis is exactly what I've been looking for. I want a machine-wide data cache, not too heavyweight, but accessible to multiple instances of Excel, because it would be inefficient for multiple Excel sessions to draw down duplicate data from a network server. In my humble opinion, much better to draw down the data from one executable, Redis, and then have the Excel sessions call into Redis locally. Now, there are many examples on the internet of how to write an RTD server in C#. One very good example is here. This is the Learning Tree blog article. Most of these articles, however, they share a similar pattern in the sense they give themselves a timer and a single data item, and which is typically a timestamp, so they can show the timestamp moving. Now, I started from those examples and then I expanded the functionality. I want multiple data items, and I also want to make use of the multiple arguments, because we have arguments. There's several arguments that are being passed in, and we can use that to detail an interface. So for example, I want to supply a JSON path to a JSON document. So I do have a stockbroker, but I'm not going to advertise their data. Instead, I invented a fake financial security called Excel Coin. And with this code is a stochastic price, so it just fluctuates, goes up and down. And I write the Excel Coin price to a Redis using this code here. That's just a scalar number, so that's the top item. And then I also write a JSON document here, and that's actually builds the JSON document as a string, and then we pull out the timestamp as using a JSON path. Now the code, so you can use this code, but you'll need the C# code later on in the article. So if you just hold on. Now I invented Excel Coin just to fake a real-time data feed. If you already have a real-time data feed, then you can just use that instead. You just rework the code here. So the code is quite long for my blog anyway. It's worth talking through. The project type is a C# assembly, and on project properties on the build tab we have register for com interrupt checked. Also in assembly I've got convisible equals true. And because we're doing com registration, you'll need to run Visual Studio with administrator rights. The RTD interfaces are defined in the Excel primary interop assembly, so you need an add reference to this. And because I'm going to be doing some JSON processing later, I added a reference to newtonsoft.json using the package manager. So let's look at the C# code for this RTD server. I do try to write object-oriented code. In listing, there are 3 major classes plus some minor helper classes. The code split is intended to promote code reuse. Firstly, there's the RTD server class, and which houses the RTD interface implementation. Second major class is the Redis socket class, and this handles the sockets class calling into Redis. Hopefully these two classes will be reusable. Thirdly, the RTD server class bridges the RTD server and Redis socket classes. This is less likely to be reusable, as it is very much idiosyncratic to this application. Now, one potential impediment to reuse in this instance is my error handling. The RTD function will smother any errors. If you want to communicate an error, you need to write it to a log, or if you call the Windows API, the output debug string function, and then you view the output to that using the debug view application from sysinternals. Also, I can pass back the error message so it is written to the calling cell. And in actual fact, I tend to do both. So I write both to debug view, I write both to the output debug string, and I return an error to the calling cell. So to facilitate this error handling, I have a new help class called the debug monitorable exception class, which subclasses the main exception class. Now, error handling can be quite a personal choice, so feel free to take a different view to me on the error handling. Two of the three major classes, Redis socket and RTD server, they have some COM interfaces which allows them to be callable from VBA. This promotes reuse. I like to develop classes in C# whilst writing unit tests in Excel VBA. This is frequently how many of my classes mature and evolve. Now, we all know that global variables are naughty and in fact impossible in C#. However, I needed a singleton instance which serves as a global variable. I needed a single instance of the Redis socket class to be initialized and then be available thereafter. I found that creating and disposing the class every time I wanted to read a price caused this RTD server code to freeze. Once I moved over to using a singleton instance, it didn't freeze anymore. Now, the RTD server class implements the IRTD server interface. Now, you can read about the IRTD server interface by looking at the official Microsoft documentation. However, the Learning Tree blog actually gives a good introduction to this interface, so you're probably better off reading this. And in actual fact, you're probably better off getting the example code working from here, getting this working first before you come back to my code, because my code is a bit more complicated. So start with them and then come back to me. Now, the Redis socket class encapsulates a minimalistic interface to Redis. There are more comprehensive C# Redis interface libraries if you want them, but for this blog, this code will serve. The code uses the TCP client class to send and receive bytes via sockets to and from Redis. In terms of passing the response, the code uses a very simple split function. This is based on some equally simple VBA split function code which I wrote in the previous blogs. So it's very basic, but it does serve. I won't comment further on this. If you want more details about Redis and Redis responses, then please read the previous two Redis blog posts. Now, the third major class is the Redis RTD server class, and that houses the application-specific code. As mentioned above, in order to make the Redis sockets and the RTD server classes as reusable as possible, I felt it necessary to offload as much as possible into a third class, this class, the Redis RTD server class, which houses all the code idiosyncratic to this application. It's called by the RTD server class, which hands an array of strings as parameters. The Redis RTD server class interprets this array of strings, and this is the role of the router method. The first string in the array is the key, and for our Excel coin, this is the key, and for the JSON meta document, the JSON document is the key here with the extra / meta. The second string in the array specifies a handler which allows different processing logic. So if I want a single price, then I say just give me a scalar. And actually it started off with just a blank, so the blank gives you scalar as well, making the scalar the default. But our other options are available. So here I've added some code to fulfill a request for a JSON document. And in the instance where you have a JSON document, the third string that is passed through, third in this array of strings, can be a JSON path, which allows to drill down into the JSON document. And actually, let's just show you that's the purpose of this. That's implemented here. That's implemented here with this Newtonsoft code. And this is extensible, so it's perfectly conceivable that in the future you could have another option. So XML, and you could have an XPath expression to be supplied, so you can drill down into an XML document. So I think you agree you can actually build quite a complex interface because you've got many parameters to play with. They seem to go on forever here. It says topics 456 and then ... Now, just to prove that we are using Redis, I ought to show you Redis. Let's just show this. So that's the scalar, but it's stored as a string in Redis. And that's the JSON document. So you can see the scalar is stored as a number there. I've got it point. And we have the timestamp, that's an Excel timestamp.